Hi everyone. I'm going to do just a quick video lecture here about a couple of topics in our chapter about social psychology, which is one of my favorite chapters. There's a lot in it that I can't cover just in video lectures, but it's a really good chapter. And one of the things that social psychologists are interested in is how do people explain the behavior of others and explain their own behavior. And one of the concepts in social psychology is this idea of attributions. And there can be internal attributions for behavior or external. Okay, and so an internal attribution would be that is the cause of the behavior is because of something inside the person. So if I do really well on a test, if I'm making an internal attribution, I would say, oh, I did really well on that test because I'm just a very smart person. That's an internal attribution for the behavior. Okay. Now, an external attribution means that something outside of the person caused the behavior. So if I did really poorly on a test, I might say, oh, I only did bad on that test because it was way too hot in that room. Okay, so that's an external attribution. And we do this all the time, and we have some biases in this process. And the main one I'm going to talk about here is the fundamental attribution error. This is where we have a tendency as people to attribute the behavior of other people to internal causes. So when we see someone cut us off in traffic, we don't think, oh, wow, they must really be in a hurry for a meeting. Maybe they have a sick child to get to. No, usually what we think is, that person's a horrible driver. What an idiot. Um, if we're watching football and we see a player fumble the ball, we think, wow, that guy is just a horrible football player. And we have a tendency when we see other people do things to attribute their behavior to internal factors when that may not be the case. So that's what the fundamental attribution error is. I'm imagining there will be a test question about that. I'm going to pause the video here for a second and pull up the next slide. Okay, the other topic I wanted to talk about in this chapter is obedience, which I think is a really interesting topic. And in this week's announcement, I've also linked a YouTube video, or maybe it's in the discussion, to one of the most famous um, experiments in psychology, which is Milgram's obedience study. And this is a situation where they had people in a room reading questions to someone in the other room who's not actually there. And if the person gets the question wrong, the first person is supposed to shock them. And the shocks go from very mild up to very, very, these aren't real shocks, but the person thinks the shocks go from mild to possibly deadly. And every time the person gets the question wrong, they're supposed to shock them a little more each time. And behind the person is a doctor in a white coat telling them what to do. And what we find, what the experiment found was that people were willing to continue shocking people until they possibly might be dead if they have an authority figure nearby telling them to do so. Okay, and so some of the things, I encourage you to watch that video this week, and some of the things that were going on there is that the status and prestige of the experimenter made it very likely for people to listen to them and follow what they said. The behavior of other people can influence obedience. So if you're with a group of people and you're being asked to do something that you don't want to do, and you look around and all the other people don't want to do it also, then you're far less likely to be obedient than if you're stuck by yourself. Okay. Um, and the question is, are these findings relevant today? Well, they absolutely are. People have trouble challenging people in positions of authority. If you remember several years ago during the Iraq War, there were these pictures that came out of military personnel having prisoners in these really demeaning, degrading situations. Sometimes the prisoners were naked, sometimes they were put into these sexual positions. And when they talked to those people, they said, well, this is just how we were told to do things. Okay, so these findings are still really relevant. There's a movie on Netflix, I think, called Obedience, or maybe it's Compliance, but it touches on these issues. One of the things interesting about this is this study ethical? If I wanted to do this study today, there's no way I could do it, because the people who thought they were essentially shocking somebody to death experienced a lot of stress. And these days you can't put people in those positions, so you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to do it today. And what do these results mean? Basically, this study showed that under certain conditions, good people can do really horrible things, and that's something that's really important for us to be aware of. You can see here, this is a graph from the experiment where there's slight shocks to these dangerous, severe shocks, and people just kept shocking. Some of them stopped eventually, but many of them shocked, and again, they didn't know that this wasn't real, but they essentially shocked someone to death in this experiment, and you'll see that in the video. And I think that's about it for this video lecture. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.